Well, that NFL draft and free agency is getting closer. We're going to talk about defensive backs and also why I believe the Jaguars will have a few surprises in free agency. We'll discuss that and more here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
She's right. It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen, reminding you that wherever you get your podcast, make sure you check in each and every day so you do not miss an episode of the show because it is your team every day. You can find us whether you listen to or watch podcasts. Wherever you do that, make sure you don't miss a show. Here's what we're talking about today: surprises in free agency. We'll talk about maybe positions that'll get addressed that we have not discussed that will get addressed. Once we get to learn a little bit more about the staff, we might not know the things prior to that happening. They might sign somebody in free agency and we'll be like, what? And then that's when you'll get that they prioritize some things a little bit differently. That's one of the things about going from one staff to another, one GM to another. You never, ever know which way they're going to go. Draft and free agency, cornerbacks and safeties, we'll go through both of those. But first, I'm going to start the show off by telling you why DB is a major priority. Because it's a major priority. That's why. Obviously, they don't have enough. I don't believe they have enough talent in the defensive backfield. I don't think they have safeties that really, really make a difference. That includes Darnell Savage. I think they have some role players. I think they got one corner, and some people don't even think that that's enough, and Tyson Campbell. I do like Jarian Jones' potential, and I think his potential might extend beyond the slot. So let's get right into that. Where do I see the people that the Jaguars have on the team playing? Tyson Campbell is going to play right cornerback. I don't know if they move people around. I haven't. I guess I'll probably watch some more film or tape today on the Green Bay Packers defense. I may go back and watch the old Green Bay and Jaguars game because that'll give you a real goosebumpy way of looking at things, and you'll see the way Anthony Campanile saw the Jaguars offense also, and then what he was looking at on defense. We'll get a chance to talk about that. But one of the things I want to know is I do know that Green Bay has guys. They always had a lot of guys that were extremely versatile. They had dudes all over the place, right? And it's almost like Philadelphia, where you had, instead of just having, okay, this is your corner, that's your safety, they were mixing and matching and playing on the back end. They were playing all kinds of games on the back end, and they were able to do that because they could rush the passer up front. Green Bay was, well, at least Philadelphia was. Green Bay they still want to add more to their pass rush, but with Kenny Clark and they have some great talent, and they Devontae Wyatt is there. They've used a lot of capital, a lot of draft capital on their edge rushers. They've gotten so many guys they use first and second round draft picks on. The thing about them is they played fast and they moved and they flowed to the ball, and their DBs really challenged everything. There was an energetic approach to it. It didn't always work, but there was this energetic approach to it, and you saw what they led with. And the year prior to that, when Campanile was with Philadelphia Eagles, current Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator Vic Fangio at Miami, I thought they kind of played the same way. And they just faltered in some big games, I thought, because their offense wasn't physical enough. Now, there was a lot of people that were happy to see Fangio go and Fangio leave, and then you go and see what he did in Philadelphia. That makes you understand that sometimes players don't make the wisest decisions. Sometimes players, when they have to make choices, don't always make the wisest decisions about who they want to play for. So getting back to the Jaguars and what I believe they have to do, they have to play complementary on football on defense, where on offense and defense. But for this argument or for this discussion, we're going to talk about defensively. I think the back and the front, they have to go together. Like, really, like, go together. Like, you're high school, you're middle school, we go together, So that means you're going to be complimenting each other every single day. You have to have a good pass rush, but then you have to have guys that can cover. When the pass rush breaks down a little bit, the coverage can help. And the guys who are making those moves on the pass rush, they get to make second moves and secondary moves and chase the quarterback off a square and run him into some trouble. when the DBs are struggling and the pass rush is there, it makes the quarterback do things faster than he wants to do them. It makes him show tails. And therefore, even when you're short manned a little bit on the back end, you can figure it out because you know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to be running for his life. Go look at the Super Bowl. It was both. The Eagles had good corners and good safety play, and their linebackers were running all over the field, and the pass rush was working. So ideally, what you want to do, and especially if you're a new staff, you want to start building this so that it's complementary. That might lead to some surprises, right? I think the Jaguars need two safeties. If they're going to stick with Darnell Savage, and there wasn't any they didn't cross paths, Darnell Savage and Campanile, because Campanile came to be the coach. Savage was let go in free agency, and then they went out and got Xavier McKinney. But maybe that can tell you or give you some kind of idea what they feel that they needed in free agency and what they felt they needed to do. And maybe it wasn't Campanile's decision, obviously, because he wasn't the defensive coordinator, but he saw it firsthand. He saw that they upgraded from one guy and how important Xavier McKinney was to that team that went out and paid all of that money for him. And he turned out to be a really, really good player. I think he made all pro, if I'm not mistaken. So you see that. You also see where in the playoff games, how important it was to have guys who could challenge on the back end, who could be really, really physical. And I don't think the Jaguars have those guys right now. I don't think they have the difference makers, right? It'll be very, very interesting to me if this new staff looks at Andre Cisco and goes, you know what? Let's give him a 1-year prove-it deal, or maybe give him a 2-year deal that's friendly for him, friendly for the team, and keep him around. I do think he could be a top 3 safety on a football team that's trying to win. Like if you put him in that C.J. Gardner-Johnson role where he's not necessarily a free safety, he's a big physical. He misses some tackles sometimes, and it bothers me because he's fast, he's physical, he's willing, he's big, and he's thick built like Ryan Clark used to be. But for some reason, it's like it never really, really kind of comes together for him. And I'm thinking that it's more a schematic deal and more of an overall defense, because I really hate to see him go somewhere else and start to prosper when you have him right here and you can do it right at home. Darnell Savage, I don't know. I can look at it here on one of the salary cap sites to see what it would take to move on from him. But I don't know if they're willing to just move on after one season with Darnell Savage. But I didn't see a whole bunch to make me think that he was like the answer for that secondary. I remember in training camp, we asked Doug, of all the guys on your team, who's like the tough guy? Who would you want in a bar fight? Somebody asked him a question. It was legit. He said Savage. And this is before he had even had any contact. So maybe he has something about his demeanor or something about him that they know in the building or they knew in the building, and we just can't see it. But I didn't see a big difference. In fact, I kind of think Rayshawn Jenkins was better, in my opinion, when he was here. And then he went and played in Seattle, and he had an even better season. But things always looked bad last year for the Jaguars on a lot of fronts. So it's not just on the players that you saw. But there is a priority for DBs. I think they add 3, maybe a starting corner and 2 in free agency, or 1 in free agency and 2 in the draft, or vice versa. We'll see, but I think they need at least 3 guys influxed into that defense. And guess what we're going to do in segment 2? You ain't going to believe it. I'm going to tell you where you can get the 3 guys at and who all they are. Who all is going to be over there? That's what we're going to talk about in the next segment here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Well, now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress, and you can focus on your day. You'll get an expert who will find every deduction possible and find every form and file every form, every investment. Everything will be with 100% accuracy. All you can do is get the most money back, guaranteed. That's right. And that's what will happen if you go to TurboTax. So no waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is what taxes are. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates, only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantee. All right, segment 2, running it down here on Locked On Jaguars, where it is your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. I'm going to take a look at some draft and free agency DBs here. We're going to start first with free agency because that's where it all starts. It usually starts with free agency, and free agency comes before the draft. Now, it's a little bit confusing sometimes because the combine is next week. And of course, the Jags are having a continuous search this week for they're interviewing their 5 candidates for GM. I'm starting to hear a lot of smoke about Ian Cunningham. So we'll wait and let that play out. But whoever they get, they're going to have to make a decision on what they want to do. Now, they signed Tyson Campbell to a long-term extension. I think it's like 4 years, right? But it's really, really good money. Normally, you don't see teams sign both corners to that type of money. It just usually doesn't happen, right? One deal is usually a little more friendly, or it's a guy on a rookie deal. So I would suspect that if the Jaguars want to get a corner, they're probably going to do it in a draft. I don't think they're going to be waiting on safety when it comes to the draft. So I'm going to look at some safeties here in the National Football League draft. In free agency. And one that comes to mind is Javon Holland. Now, I know he's not everybody's favorite, right? The reason why I say that is because Javon Holland, and I try not to put too much into social media because signing free agents is a two-way street, right? But Javon Holland had been a really, really productive player the first 3 years in Miami. The last year, he was just okay because he was banged up a little bit. He ain't the surest tackler in the world sometimes, right? Sometimes he misses those tackles, but he's a rangy dude, and he can really, really play. And he made a post about Anthony Campanile, who had been with Miami before he went to Green Bay. And the thing that he said about Coach Campanile was one of the best coaches, basically. I'm paraphrasing. He said, one of the best coaches. So now you get into a situation where if the Jags want him, he seems like he wants to be wanted by a team like Jacksonville, right? So I'm gonna take these glasses off. I don't need them because I got this thing so close. But he seems like day one, number one guy that you would go sign if you're a team that knows that there's a guy that wants you, you want him. He understands your system. He understands your defense. I really believe that it's a no-brainer for them to go after him. Now, it will cost you a lot of money because he is on the top of everybody's board when it comes to, I think he's like in the top 5 along with T. Higgins and some other people. He is like at the top of everybody's board when it comes to safeties, right? And his worst year, he was a whole lot better than a whole bunch of people, right? Another guy you can look at that plays like his hair is on fire is Talanoa Hufanga with the 49ers. More of a tackler, more than a ball guy. He doesn't really play the ball as well, but here's a tackling machine, man, in that secondary. And he's another guy. And if they try to add 2, I can understand that. I don't have a problem with them signing 2 free. Remember the last time the Jaguars signed 2 safeties? It was Barry Church, and they went out and got Tayshaun Gibson, and that was for Jacksonville in 2017. So if the price is right, you might have to make a choice. Do you get 1 or can you get 2? If you get Holland, you're probably only able to get 1 because he's going to cost so much. But Hufanga, guys like him, guys like Cameron Bynum, Minnesota has a lot of work to do. They have a lot of free agents. Justin Reed is another guy I really, really like from Kansas City. I just don't know if you're going to get 2 of these guys, right? Harrison Smith's a little long in the tooth for me. He's older. Another name that is very familiar a few years ago when the Jaguars were in the market for a safety, he was in the draft with Javon Holland. His name is Trevon Merrick with the Raiders. That is another person that a lot of Jacksonville Jaguar fans will have on their mind. And, of course, guys like Jeremy Chin, who's more of a box safety. There's some other guys out there, but mainly even Andre Cisco is here on PFF. I've used PFF just for consistency's sake. I don't know if they double dip at safety, but I do think they get 1 guy. I think they get a veteran. If I had to put my money on it, I think it would probably be Javon Holland. as far as free agency goes. Now in the draft, there's a very, very, very good safety prospect named Malachi Starks. The Jags pick too high. If you see the Jags move back, then I'll start thinking, okay, maybe Starks is somebody that they're thinking about. But I think they have too many other priorities. I think they need to get bigger and beefier on their line of scrimmage, or go ahead and address the wide receiver position. I don't think they're going to use their first pick of this regime on a safety unless they think he's Ed freaking Reed. But Malachi Starks is a pretty good football player and a guy who obviously, if you want a safety, you're definitely going to be able to get a good safety. Now, what if they go corner? What if they surprise you and go corner? Who fits? I don't really know who fits their defense the best. You may see them, depending on how Anthony Campanile is able to talk to them, you may see them go after Jair Alexander, who I hear the Green Bay Packers are going to set free. Now, he's been banged up, but man, when he was good, he was really, really good, right? Do they go for a guy who's totally opposite of what they have in Tyson Campbell? Do they look and say, look, we can add a really good nickel and take Jaron Jones and give him a shot outside? Do they take that chance? I don't know if he has been typecast or just set in stone as a slot or a nickel, because that's where he played. But man, there are some good nickels here in free agency, guys that can really go out there and get it. But there's some other guys, like the nickel guys. First of all, Mike Hilton is one of them, and Nate Hobbs is the other. Mike Hilton, of course, played for Pittsburgh for a long time, and then last year was with the Cincinnati Bengals as their nickel. And Nate Hobbs plays for the Raiders. These guys really, they might be better at nickel than Jaron Jones, only because they have more experience. So I'm wondering if the Jags say, you know what, let's give Jaron Jones a try outside. You remember Campanile said something like, we had a book on all of these guys when we evaluated them in the draft. So they're not beholden to what the past staff has done. And I want y'all to remember that. They're not beholden to what the past staff has done. But if they don't address cornerback in free agency, which wouldn't surprise me if they did, they're sitting right there at 5. I don't think Travis Hunter's going to fall to him, but if he does, it's a no-brainer. I think you take him. I think he's electric as a corner. I think you can use him every now and then, especially when the game gets tough. You can put him in at wide receiver and have a few plays for him. But I don't think he's going to fall to him. So if you look at the Jags adding wide receiver, offensive line, or defensive line help early, then you ask yourself, okay, what can they do in the draft in round 2 or maybe even round 3? Will Johnson's another guy everybody likes. We're going to have to see what happens with him at the combine. He has a freaky athletic way about him. It's just that sometimes I watched him play and I was like, I don't quite see it. But maybe at 6'2", 202 pounds, you can look at him at the combine and say, man, we just got to figure that out. But some other guys, some other options are Javon Revel, who's a big 6'3" corner out of East Carolina, probably goes early in round 2. Benjamin Morrison, a really good player for Notre Dame. You didn't see him late in the season because he was out, especially in the playoffs. Darian Porter is another one of those 6'4", 200-pound corners, if that's what they're looking for. If you're looking for more of a wiry, smaller frame dude, not really short, not really little, but just not 6'4", the two guys that come to mind for me are Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky, really twitchy, really twitchy. A little on the thin side, but that's all right. He's very athletic. And Azariah Thomas for Florida State at 6'2", 198 pounds. Two very good players that the Jaguars could go after. And I think they come into camp and they're day one starters. Now, I do like this kid, Mello Dotson, also at Kansas. I think you can probably get Mello Dotson late in the 3rd round. I think he's going to be another very good player. I've told you all the time, man, the key is for the Jacksonville Jaguars to find help and not just stumble upon it, but to be able to find, like somebody looking for treasure, to be able to find the type of help that doesn't cost you a bunch of money, and that is done in the NFL draft. I'll continue to talk DBs, but then I'll tell you some surprise positions in the draft that may have the Jaguars' name written all over it. We'll talk about it more here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, when the NBA games tip off, the action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team or a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, rolling along here, third and final segment on Locked On Jaguars. I've been talking a lot of drafts and positions today. I got to get this out of the way, man, because they're going to the combine next week. Things are going to shift, things are going to move, and then when they do that, they're going to come back, and it's going to be time to dive into free agency, which comes before the draft. So I'm letting you know in one show on these positions, I'm giving you insight on how you can get both things done in free agency and in the draft and add to your team. I definitely think they're going to add 3 DBs. If it's 2 corners or if it's 1 corner, and then they go with the young guys that they have as backup players. If they pick up veteran free agents like late in the process, if they double back and don't feel like they have enough, and they go for like a Stephon Gilmore type to come in here and sort of bridge the gap a little bit. If they tap into players that they've had previous relationships with, we mentioned Javon Holland with Anthony Campanile. We also have Jair Alexander, who didn't have a lot of time with him because Alexander was always out with Green Bay. It really depends on his medicals, because the last thing you want to do is bring a guy in that isn't healthy. I don't think they hold on to Darby. I think Ronald Darby has probably played his last down here. I could be wrong. I could very well be wrong about that, but I don't believe that's something that they're going to do. Surprises in free agency. Now, these are some things where I've seen a couple of players, and I keep hearing rumblings that the Jaguars will definitely be more active in free agency than you know. I think a lot of that attention will go to the offensive line and maybe find a third edge rusher that you can pay decent amount of money to. Remember now, the third edge rusher type I'm talking about is somebody that's going to actually make more money than the guy who's picked first in the draft. First round pick in the draft makes about $7-8 million a year at the very top of the first round. I'm thinking that they might go out and give a dude $8-9-10 million to be the third pass rusher on this team. They could very well do that. But when you look at, let's just say, Green Bay, a team where just this past season, Anthony Campanile was the coach. One of those linebackers that I'm really, really looking at that I think that they might go after is someone like Eric Wilson, 6'2", 225 pounds, who played he played more. He played a lot last year in comparison to some of the other players that they had, even though they drafted Edgerrin Cooper. Guys like that, man, that this coach knows, right? So I doubt if what they do is, I doubt if they just totally turn their back on some of the guys that they have right now. If they went outside Eric Wilson, he'd just be depth. He'd probably be their fourth or compete for, like if they want to move on from Chad Muma or something like that. But if they do something like this and they go after Isaiah McDuffie, who's 26 years old, who played and knows Anthony Campanile. Obviously, they have a relationship, I believe, that goes back to Boston College, where they were there together. See, this is a guy who's 26 years old, and you go, okay, I can get him this year, and I got to either decide on Devin Lloyd and I got to decide on Muma with 1 year to go. Why don't we just move on from them now? And I could go ahead and get a guy here to run with Foye and to run with Ventrell. And those be our main 3 linebackers. But even though we run two linebackers at a time, but at least it's a guy that I know, and it won't cost us a whole bunch of money. And maybe you dangle Devin Lloyd out there. Maybe you get a 3rd round pick for him at this point. because he's still a really, really good player, right? That may be something that they do because Isaiah McDuffie, more than anybody, will know and understand the workflow of Anthony Campanile. See, this is why I say you can never tell where they're going to go and get help, because sometimes it's not exactly where you think it might be. So what if they did that? What if they got McDuffie? What if they take a flyer on Jair Alexander, but they still say, you know what, in the third round, we're going to go look at another one of those corners? And then what if they got Javon Holland? Like, how would you like that on the back end? So now they'll singularly focus on those trenches and the wide receivers in the draft. These are things that you really, really, really have to watch out for. Eric Stokes is another dude that was a first-round pick, and one of those other players out of Georgia hasn't lived up to it. Do they try him and make him a dude that they could use as a third or fourth corner? Do they go to Daryl Slayton and say, you know what, we had a problem stopping the run. We need a big, young, well, he's 28, but still a big body who we can pay some money, who could come in and shore that up if we decide that we're not going in that direction in the first round or two, because they're going to give Mason Smith a chance, because they're going to give Anthony Campanile. They're going to keep Devon Hamilton, and they still are paying a whole bunch of money to Eric Armstead, so they don't want to use another priority resource. Then Slayton is the exact type of dude that you go for, another dude that understands the workflow, understands what he has to do in order to get on the field for the coach that he's already played for. Familiarity is something else, man. Familiarity is something else. It really, really does mean a lot when you're evaluating free agents. Sometimes the talent it's not just about the talent. Sometimes it's about guys knowing the system and knowing where they fit into it and getting the value out of that player. So those are some people that I looked at on the surface that they might. And it was all connected. And these aren't even guys that aren't connected to these teams. These are guys that aren't even connected to these teams. But remember, they got an assistant defensive backs coach who also came from Green Bay. Maybe they go to the linebackers coach who recently coached in Carolina. They could go and ask him what he thinks about some of those guys that they have coming. That's the first thing you do. Look for the connections of these dudes that are in free agency that don't cost you a bunch of money, but that can play well for the amount of money that you're willing to pay them, and then you use the priority resources somewhere else. So be very, very cautious of these things. Watch who they're evaluating. Keep your eye on the GM search too, because whoever that is, then find out where he was. If there are guys that he picked that actually played well, not just because he picked them, but that actually played well, that could be a part of the Jacksonville Jaguars moving forward. It's really fun, man, when you get into this new space and you don't know what they're going to do. Because, you know, if you don't know, other people don't know. So between the GM, the new staff, I want to see the direction that they go in, and the direction they go in will tell us how they feel about the current players and give us an idea of what type of team they want to build in the future. All right, make sure you check out Locked On NFL, a double dose of NFL action where we use the local experts and talk about everything going on around the league. Tyler Rowland in the morning, the madman will wake you up like a double shot of espresso, and then I'll slide in at about 2 o'clock every day in the barbershop and give you the same thing, but twice a day. You guys take care. We'll keep evaluating these positions. Until next time, thank you for joining Locked On Jaguars. We'll see you later.